When the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed into the Patapsco River around 1:30 a.m. Eastern Time yesterday, at least 8 people went missing. 2 were swiftly rescued, one of whom remains hospitalized. 6 others, however, are now presumed dead. We don't have many details on these 6 victims, but we know they came to America from Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. We don't know their immigration status. We don't know how long all of them lived and worked in America. We do know their work was, on the very best days, backbreaking and perilous. These immigrants fixed potholes and made other repairs on a road that was suspended more than 180 feet above the chilly river waters below. We know they often worked in the middle of the night. We know the bridge spans swayed. We know that cars sped by them at frightening speeds. We also know this. In the past 10 years or so, at least since June 2015, workers like these immigrants from Mexico or Central American countries have been habitually and intentionally slandered as violent criminals, mental defectives, or carriers of wicked diseases. Statistically, those slanders have never, ever been true. But the slanders have resonated and spawned a kind of snarling fear and resentment in certain parts of our American political landscape. The workers who died yesterday must be mourned, their families comforted, economic redress made. But even more, let us hope, no, let us resolve that their deaths may begin to dislodge the rabid contemporary reflex to scorn those who come to America to work, to flee violence, to find a better life, to turn shovels and fill potholes while we warmly sleep. Kris Van Cleave joins us now from Dundalk, Maryland. Kris, you know better than most that the National Transportation Safety Board does not arrive at catastrophes like this and suddenly pronounce all sorts of investigatory conclusions. They take their time, build the evidence gradually. But you talked to the NTSB chair earlier today. What valuable information did you learn?
Well, Major, today is really a shift. 2 things here. We moved from search and rescue to a much more grim task of search and recovery. That is the primary mission here. The National Transportation Safety Board is the second part of that. Their investigative efforts start to ramp up now that the search and rescue operation has ended. We know they got on board the giant cargo ship, the Dolly, today and have spent some time collecting evidence. They also have the voice data recorders, and those are being analyzed back in Washington. That's important because it will fairly quickly give them a minute by minute of what happened leading up to this collision. They'll know when things stopped working, if a generator came back on, those types of things that at least help give them a footprint to start looking and start this investigation. But as you said, it will be a long one. They'll likely be looking at this up to the next year before there's a probable cause finding. But we do expect updates along the way. But primary on the mind of the board chair, Jennifer Hamady, this morning was that search and recovery effort. Take a listen.
The most important thing right now is to reunite families with their loved ones and that recovery to occur. Any collection of information, that can wait. It's getting those families reunited with their loved ones. That should be the focus.
In fact, Chair Hamady said she met with families of those that have been presumed dead in this yesterday. So that was a very emotional and very powerful moment for her as she's just trying to put herself in the place of those families, waiting for word, waiting to be reunited with their loved ones who are presumed dead at this point. At least 6 people believed to have lost their lives here. The effort to recover them ongoing. We know there'll be an update a little bit later today where we expect to hear the latest on that part of this effort, Major.
And Kris, we're all learning about the scale not only of this bridge collapse, but this enormous transit vessel, this cargo ship. As I understand it, the Navy has announced some plans to begin the process, though it will take some period of time, to begin to take the debris out of the Patapsco River. What do you know about that?
Yeah, the Navy is sending basically debris removal equipment up to the port of Baltimore to begin that work. The Coast Guard told us that some of the issue here is that they've got to determine what needs to be done to make the ship seaworthy enough to move. Part of it, the bow with the part of the bridge that's resting on it, that is basically sitting on the river floor. So they need to get the debris and probably some of the cargo containers and some of the fuel off that vessel and then make sure that it is seaworthy enough to move to another location. Then they got to clear all the debris that is along the riverbed, and they'll likely have to dredge the channel that those huge ships use. You talked about the scale of this ship. It was essentially like the USS Nimitz, a United States Navy aircraft carrier, crashed into that bridge support. This is an enormous vessel. And since that bridge was built back in 1977, we've learned the size of cargo ships has quadrupled. So you had a piece of enormous weight and force go into this bridge, something that probably wasn't even conceived of going under it when they built the bridge. And that'll be one of the things the NTSB looks at here is does the way that bridges are designed and protected need to change because of what happened.
There's an economic timetable here, Kris, obviously, because there is a desire to get that seaway open again, to use the port in Baltimore, but also to begin the process of rebuilding that bridge. But none of that can happen until you move the vessel out of the way. And that seaworthiness thing could take some period of time, yes?
Absolutely. They at this point, they don't know. But this is likely something that's going to be measured in weeks or months, Major.
Kris Van Cleave in Dundalk, Maryland, thank you very much. Caitlin Huey-Burns joins us now from the North Lawn of the White House. Caitlin, great to see you as always. This bridge collapse obviously dominated today's White House briefing. Among the things you learned, what stands out?
Hey, Major, good to see you. Well, the focus of the administration right now is, as Kris mentioned, getting that port cleared out and ready for business again. The biggest questions that we had for White House officials, including Pete Buttigieg, who was at the White House briefing today, was kind of what this timeline looks like in terms of rebuilding the bridge, but also reopening this port. The economic impact of this, of course, is likely to be felt more regionally, but still really important nonetheless. This is a place where $100 to $200 million in cargo value goes in and out. About $2 million in jobs. There are local jobs that they are concerned about as well in terms of longshoremen. So the priority right now is that kind of cleared to them focused on rebuilding. I asked Pete Buttigieg what a timeline may look like in this case, and he said it's too soon to say, but take a listen.
When it comes to the actual port, can you give us a sense of what the timeline would be for reopening? Is it days? Is it weeks? Is it months? And same for the bridge. Are we talking about weeks, months? Are we talking about years?
Too soon to be certain. What I'll say in the case of the bridge is that the original bridge took 5 years to construct. That does not necessarily mean it will take 5 years to replace. As far as the port, again, too soon to venture an estimate. The vast majority of the port is inside of that bridge, which means most of it cannot operate.
Now, Major, he also referenced the I-95 portion of I-95 bridge that collapsed near Philadelphia recently and said that these two aren't really comparable. The important thing here, of course, is this is a huge bridge over vast amounts of water, whereas that one was over land. So really kind of tempering expectations in terms of recovery. But the mission today, too, is focusing on the funds that will be necessary for this kind of rebuild, and the administration making clear that they will, in their words, move heaven and earth to make sure this rebuild is possible with all resources needed from the federal government.
Caitlin, there was also an official from the Coast Guard at the White House briefing today talking about some discovery of hazardous materials on board the cargo ship. Any particular danger to the public or to the waterway?
Right. He said there's no imminent danger to the public or the waterway. This is also something that is going to be continued to be investigated by the NTSB. On that note, however, there are a lot of questions about what the liability is for this the company that owns this vessel, especially as we're talking about funding for the rebuilding of this bridge and reopening of this port. I asked Secretary Buttigieg if they have had communication with the owner of the vessel in terms of the liability, accountability, any sort of culpability for funds there. And he said, look, we're waiting for the NTSB investigation to conclude, but everyone will be held accountable if needed. But the administration is saying today, we don't have any time to wait for that. They want to release federal funds and already have, as soon as possible, emergency funds here. And importantly, they're calling on Congress to also take action here. They're waiting for Maryland to officially make that federal assistance request. But Buttigieg said today that they will likely depend on Congress to move some funds as well, and kind of urged this Congress that, as we know, has been divided on everything, to make sure there's bipartisanship here.
Caitlin Huey-Burns at the White House, thank you very much.